what do you think of this idea that there might be a lot of people who don't actually think that he's Republican or think that he's not really a Republican? Is this an open primary? Is there a concern that Democrats might vote for him?
No, Pennsylvania is a very closed primary. I mean, this is a reason why when they were a little bit delusional, Republicans were hopeful that that they could beat Trump in the 2016 primary. They didn't understand the appeal he had yet because they thought loyal Republicans wouldn't vote for him. So it's going to be a Republicans-only primary, but the Republican Party in Pennsylvania has been adding more registered members. I mean, just the Trump campaign made this effort to convince everybody who maybe was a yellow dog, fifth-generation Democrat, but they always voted Republican for sheriff or something, become a Republican. So it's going to be a Republican primary. I really haven't seen people take hits at Oz yet, and I think that's some questions about which candidates are relevant enough to make news on their own. I think they can force that. I mean, if let's say I'm a Pennsylvania reporter right now, and they're really good ones who broke the news in this race. I mean, they've been vetting his record and his donations. But if you're writing about Dr. Oz, you want to get a response to what he says. You have to get it from 10 people of whom maybe one Pennsylvania has heard of. I don't think I cover this for a living. I could not get a quiz right on who they're running for. So I think when you have a bigger field, you'll see some of those arguments play out. I just know that when Oz was getting in, that was the confidence. Well, guy's not really from here, and he's donated Democrats, and we can define him as somebody they can't trust as a true conservative. The problem is if he does introduce himself as he's not going to be the most MAGA, most pro-Trump candidate. He's just not going to be. There's going to be guys who beat him on that. But if he is the most, I'd say, individualist candidate, if he's the one who says, unlike everybody else, I'm going to let you live your life, and I'm going to fight the celebrity, not the celebrities. I'm going to fight the establishment, the media, because I know it from the inside. That's been a very powerful argument for some people, but it's a very small universe of people. There are not that many people this famous who are on TV this often like Dr. Oz is. So you can't really compare him even to a Kanye West who was running it. Well, no, he was running kind of an odd joke campaign, but one that didn't really have a message until the very end. It wasn't on stage. This is a normal campaign that's saying, I am going to use the tools that let me build the real American dream into my own life. I'm going to use those to help everybody. They need to come up with, if they want to beat him, a good argument against that. And I think that you're going to see that from the hedge fund candidate. It says, well, I also had an American dream, and I did even better, and I didn't have to push any pills I was paid to push in order to do it. I mean, I think that's where they're going to go, where I can see them gravitating to. But the first week of him in the race, they're kind of stepping back and seeing what he does.
Well, this could be a kind of a test of whether or not kind of the left or liberals have a better assessment of what actually made Donald Trump popular, right? Because ever since 2016, there has been this ongoing debate about whether or not it's just kind of pure unbridled racism that drove people toward Trump, or whether it's a mix of that, along with a undercurrent of anti-establishment, distrust of government, frustration with the lack of follow through on the part of government, institutional distrust. All of those kinds of things are actually acting on the voters' decision making. Because if you have someone like Dr. Oz, who is not so virulently bigoted, someone who has these close associations with Oprah, someone who's hugging a black woman in his opening ad, someone who could be not very fairly painted as the bigot, who is from a country that Donald Trump might describe as a shithole country, this is not, of course that it is, but it's more difficult for people to fit Dr. Oz into that kind of narrative. And depending on whether or not he's actually able to capture that Trump base might be some kind of validation for the left, who's been arguing that the liberal portrait of what caused Trump is overly simplistic for 5 years now.
Yeah, well, he's not just hard to bear in that way. He'd be the first Muslim senator. He has said that he practices transcendental meditation, which and both of those things. I'm a pluralist. I haven't tried TM. I haven't tried Islam, but those are things generally that I think somebody who's running as a Democrat would get different questions. And I mean, Dr. Sel Sayed, I got these. He had racists following around asking about Islam. That you do get scanned differently if you're Republican, because the message is, I have a different life experiences than you people, but unlike the left, I'm not trying to cram everyone into a box, which I think liberals still kind of underestimate how powerful that is. Look at, again, the Virginia election results. that was a mixed convention process where party activists chose their nominees, and down the ballot where they could choose non-white nominees, they did. I mean, this is really important to the dogma and the argument the party's making now, is that we're going to welcome everybody in because we're all set against the elites and the white liberals with their Ibram Kendi books. We all don't like those guys. We've got our own thing going. I'm probably sounding more bullish on Oz than his own campaign is saying. I'm not saying he's automatically going to do this. I'm saying he's got big openings that I do think at this point, even though they've been a little bit slow to realize that, the liberals who do not embarrass themselves on Twitter by talking about white supremacy when they're talking about black candidates, I think generally Democrats have a better sense that the Republican voter does not need somebody to run down a chart and be the most conservative candidate on these top 10 points. That the image and the image that is unlike other Republicans, the ones that Democrats might have a tough time responding to, he hasn't really leaned into that, but I do think it's Democrats I talk to who could see why that'd be more popular.
One of the most interesting things about this is that even though in the mind's eye, Dr. Oz has been aligned with all of the kind of cable news liberals up until this point, now that he's in the race as a Republican, there is this weird dissonant coverage that's coming out of places like Entertainment Tonight and The View.
The TV doctor, Mehmet Oz, wants to be the next senator of Pennsylvania.
Oh, God.
Let me close my lips. But it's pretty clear whose vote he's courting when he went on Sean Hannity last night. Take a look.
Remember the phrase 2 weeks to flatten the curve, right? That metastasized into this incredible authoritarianism, overreaching, that did not necessarily make us safer. Remember they closed the parks, they shamed people about beaches, right? And now they're threatening the same overreach for the Omicron as you were just talking about. I think those choices should be yours, the American people's.
I would say I'm an America first, make America great again conservative. How would you describe in just a sentence your political ideology?
I match yours. I think this country has all the building blocks to be spectacular.
What happened to him? What happened to him?
Face.
He's gone over to the dark side.
Oh my God.
I know.
It's hard to see a doctor saying that,
Well, Dr. Paul Rand, what's his name? Rand Paul.
Yeah, but he's like a something. I don't want to.
He's an eye doctor.
Yeah,
He's
something, but he's not.
He's merely an optometrist.
He's a medical doctor.
His eyes,
He's a medical
which
doctor.
are important, but like.
Yeah.
Well, but,
it's interesting because we all know Dr. Oz, and I've been on his show. We've all socialized with him, but I feel like he took a turn with COVID in particular. I know his specialty is the heart.
Yeah.
But I remember in April of 2020, he said that in terms of kids going back to school, he said this, I tell you, schools are a very appetizing opportunity. I just saw a nice piece in The Lancet, which is a medical journal, arguing that the opening of schools may only cost us 2 to 3% in terms of total mortality. And he was arguing that we should open up schools. And my thought was, so you're willing to sacrifice the lives of our children?
Yeah.
Was he willing to sacrifice the lives of his children and his grandchildren? And that's when, right? That's when I saw the turn in him.
He turned before that. I'm
point.
sorry.
Really?
He turned that before that.
If you guys go on YouTube, there's an interview I did on another show with him where he measured my BMI, and he said to me, he said, "You're underweight." So at that moment, I don't trust him.
You gotta love Joy. I mean, so what was funny to me is that they all had to negotiate the fact that they were all obviously friends and going to dinner parties with Dr. Oz up until this point. But, you looked at his political donations. Is he newly a Republican, or did they just not mind so long as he was going to run for office?
It wasn't clear what party he was in. I mean, he donated to. I mean, Donald Trump did the same thing, which also neutralized it. Mm-hmm. There were people who are wealthy and get known by Republicans. Glenn Youngkin actually gave $1 million over his life before he ran for governor to Republicans, and that wasn't the kind of guy Dr. Oz was. So instead, he has this sort of almost like a Substack conservative way of talking. I mean, just even that clip. Which is a clip from the clip. He's talking about they shut down the schools. They might do it again for Omicron. He's not running against especially in the Republican primary, but in the Senate election, I don't think he's going to be running against a Democrat who says, my favorite thing that we did in the last 3 years was the schools being closed for 6 months. That's not what he's going to do. Democrats will say, we took emergency measures, and it was people like Dr. Oz, with their quacky behavior, convincing people not to get vaccinated, which kept the situation getting even worse and worse. That actually, I saw a version of that argument work pretty well in California in the recall election. Well, the argument that we're about to beat this pandemic, it's the vaccine resistors that are dragging us all back. They're holding us all back. I think the Democrats, their confidence in that message got shaken after Virginia. The polling is clear, but it's like I was saying, they don't have an electoral majority of people who come out and say my number one issue is vaccines.
How's that going to fly in 2021 where more people have died? And I'm not saying this is the fault of Joe Biden, but more people have died than died last year. I mean, it undermines the argument. Not to say that vaccines don't work, but this direct correlation between the people who resist vaccines or any of the people who are accused of being anti-vaxxers, even though Dr. Oz weren't, are responsible rather for all of these deaths. That seems like the kind of bad faith attack that really put people off when Trump was being blamed, perhaps more than he was actually responsible for the pandemic last year.
With the Democrats who are actually running, I mean, Joe Biden's not going to be about in 2022, so it's going to be in Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro, who was AG running for governor. It's going to be maybe John Fetterman or Conor Lamb, people who were there in some kind of position of power, arguing for what they did. But their point is going to be there was horrible stuff we all had to get through that we never want to do again, and now we have these vaccines, and it's basically over. Now, this could all be neutralized by the Omicron variant or something like that. At the moment, that's what their argument. And so Oz is really kind of shadow boxing. Now, he's not running against the person who ordered lockdowns and is going to do it again. These are all pretty friendly interviews he's doing, where he's getting one question is kind of open-ended. I think one was just literally, Trump, what's your position? Nobody's pushing back and saying that, but I think it is intellectually more compelling than it was a year ago to say that sort of stuff. And he can say, now, he has talked so much on TV that I'm sure you can go back and find one clip and another clip in the last year, and maybe they weren't 100% consistent. But it's clear what he's going to do is say, look, I was out there as a medical professional telling people to live their own lives. We would have been better off if the schools are open. And he's ready for people to say that I was ready, that, hey, Dr. Oz, you're ready for some number of kids to die in schools. He's kind of ready to push that back. I don't think people are in great territory if they're arguing over what the good response would have been, because he's very good at talking. He's a doctor who knows his stuff, and he wasn't in power. I think it's other issues that probably are more promising. Once he gets into, okay, you're taking on Big Pharma, how exactly? Maybe he'll come up with something innovative, but maybe somebody like El Sayed
But that is my fear. There was one clip that I saw, and we can insert this without playing it, where he framed his being pulled before the Senate to respond to questions about misrepresenting the value of various weight loss products on his show. He reframed it as, they went after me. The lynch mob kind of came after me, when the real problem was that these big tech companies allowed unscrupulous actors to use the words I said on my show to sell their product, and that I was a scapegoat. And he turned it again into this conversation about how it's me, the little guy, against big tech, the government, corporate actors, and I'm merely a scapegoat.
I have fought to empower my audience, my patients, and now the voters of Pennsylvania, and I've taken on Big Pharma. I've gone to battle with Big Tech. I've gone against agrochem companies, the big ones, right? And I've got scars to prove it. And I cannot be bought, Sean. Cannot be bought. And I'll keep fighting those battles to empower the folks of Pennsylvania and around the country.
And his efficacy in doing so is concerning, and I think charts a real path forward for the right in this moment, where liberals seem to have widely abandoned populism despite the growing, faux populism on the right and the success of the Bernie-style populism that we saw in 2020. No lessons seem to have been learned.
Yeah, and I haven't seen Democrats doing all that when they talk about Oz. Even the folks on The View, this is one of my beefs with media that we won't fix on this podcast, is that in lieu of a Democrat saying something, you can find somebody on The View or MSNBC who's going to say it. So yeah, there's going to be some people who I think shove their foot in their mouth as they try to outsmart Dr. Oz on this issue. But you're right. I mean, you've been pointing out, yes, the vulnerability that he's clearly talking around and spinning before someone else gets to spin it, is, wait a second, was this guy ethical and honest, or is he making money off of recommending stuff that doesn't work? People don't generally they don't like experts, but they don't like scams either. And finding your path from not only from, okay, I'm not saying you should trust every expert, do whatever they say, but you also shouldn't trust somebody who's trying to rip you off. That is something that Hillary Clinton, I don't think, did in 2016 objectively. I think it is something that's been done in other races, but not against somebody who just talks for a living. Just you've been podcast, I'm on TV sometimes, and I don't know, countless hours. I'd say he's done at least the 10,000 hours you need to do to get good at something. He's not going to be buffaloed on some of this. I think it is more the digging that other campaigns do into his donations and whether he benefited in this and where his finances. I think it's kind of more death of 1,000 cuts that he might be ready for that look at his record, because the Dr. Oz message of the elites want to shut things down again is definitely one of the most powerful things Republicans have going to mobilize not just a chunk of their base, but I think people who might not be that interested in the midterm election normally. There's got some people who are, I know some who they're resistant to getting the vaccine. Maybe they never want to get it, and they don't pay a ton of attention to politics, but they might be interested in the guy who's giving it to the establishment and telling me not that I don't have to take a vaccine. I think that is potent in a way that Democrats don't really have anything as potent. Saying follow the rules. Look, that is, most of the country is doing that. Most people have taken the vaccine. Most people are fine with mandates. But a midterm election is not most people voting. It is a small group of super motivated people.
And Dr. El-Sayed made this point when he was talking about the idea that Dr. Oz is a charlatan, and trying to reframe that issue as, okay, but I was trying to hustle for you. I was, I might have been a cheat, but I was cheating for you. And I was thinking about how many liberals have been responding to the Cuomo brothers going down this week, ostensibly over former Governor Cuomo's Me Too scandal, and then his brother's efforts to manage it, if you will, on his cable show. And there are many people who will come to their defense, including a clip I watched in the Shade Room where folks said, look, I would do anything for my brother too. And they admire the fact on some level that Chris would cheat for his family, And I think that we shouldn't underestimate the extent to which some people will perceive Dr. Oz's alleged hucksterism as him trying to, vet stuff for you. I was trying to bring hydrochloroquine. I was trying to make sure it wasn't written off prematurely because I'm concerned about your interests and don't want the kind of elites that, for example, are getting access to this new Alzheimer medication that no one else can afford to basically hoard things for themselves while telling you that it's not good for you, which is basically what was going on with the mask stuff earlier in the year, right?
Yeah, I mean, there are lots of ways to commodify people's desire to dissent, to desire to be away from the crowd and to make money on something and to be healthier than the next person. I mean, not every there are lots of people who come up with diets that don't work, and they don't all go to jail for it. People buy it, and then they move on to do something else. So this is just anything like this where you're dealing with some sort of animal instinct that doesn't necessarily play in every campaign, but you're trying it in one where no one else is ready for it. It's always worth keeping an eye on how effective that is. Because I feel like a lot of Republicans, when they talk the way he does about mandates and experts, at the end of the day, they're still, like a Josh Mandel or whatever, is still a lifelong politician who wants to be a politician. When this is over, will want to be in office, maybe holding a different position. A guy coming in saying, look, I'm a doctor, I know what I'm talking about, and I'm going to fight the elites. We saw with Trump, you can put that into a blender and turn a lot of the negatives you might have into advantages. If people trust you and they say, well, yeah, maybe he doesn't live in this state or hasn't his whole life, and maybe he has this problem. Maybe I heard a negative thing. But you know what? He can't be bought, and he's telling it like it is, and he's not going to... I can see the minds that is working on, and they're a big part of the primary electorate. Yeah.
And to that point about, the... Sonny Hostin said, he said that we could sentence 1% to 2% of kids to death. The end of that quote, which she didn't include, was that he says, some people might think that's a reasonable bargain. or some similar verbiage we can put it in.
Yeah, I tell you, schools are a very appetizing opportunity. I just saw a nice piece in The Lancet arguing that the opening of schools may only cost us 2 to 3% in terms of total mortality. And, that's any life is a life lost. But to get every child back into a school where they're safely being educated, being fed, and making the most out of their lives with a theoretical risk in the backside, it might be a trade-off some folks would consider.
And as much as that is very craven sounding to the ear, I don't think he's wrong. He's obviously not wrong. That to some people, that is a legitimate bargain. And that is what this whole school reopening thing is about. That a lot of people were open to some level of death, including of children, for schools to reopen or for whatever political agenda that is being pushed. Yeah. And, I think liberals might overstate the extent to which that particular soundbite is damning for him, because I think it speaks to a real reality that Democrats, a lot of liberals, are continuing to miss here.
And who hears 2% and thinks that could be me? Right. Usually they hear 2% and think, oh, well, that's going to be somebody else. That's going right. And not to be super callow about this, but that's how a lot of this stuff works. If you're told you have your child has a 98% chance of surviving if we just keep the schools open, a lot of people would say, well, you roll the dice 50 times and it comes up 49 times my side. Sure, send my kid back to school. I don't think that clip's good for him necessarily, and I actually think that a risk that we don't talk about that much in the start of a campaign is how things can be used out of context, because you don't want to be part of the problem here. But I've seen candidates get just beaten to death with a quote that is half of what they meant, or they're being sarcastic and the context is there. And that is my thing with Oz, that he both has as a handicapper, he has this ability to talk on TV. He also has millions of hours of him talking in clips you can cut anywhere you want. If somebody wants to be dishonest with how they're treating him, I mean, that's in Ohio right now. I think $5 million has already been spent using actually pretty fairly in context videos of J.D. Vance in 2016 trashing Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. I don't think that exists with Dr. Oz. Do I know that somebody's not going to find a video of him responding in a way that you could, and I'm talking about very non-substantive things here, but from a realistic perspective, where campaigns often turn on very non-substantive things.
Yeah, and that is why I will not be running for office. Hey, YouTube, thanks for watching. Just a reminder that this is a podcast. You can catch an extra premium episode every Monday for $5 a month at patreon.com/badfaithpodcast. That's patreon.com/badfaithpodcast for $5 a month, an extra episode every week. Additionally, please do consider liking this video, subscribing to this channel. It helps us out. It helps independent media beat the algorithm. We appreciate you. And as always, keep the faith.